Coming up, millennials and Gen Z claim that baby boomers have stolen their heritage and that they are not able to embark on the great American or the great Australian dream of owning their own new home due to baby boomers. In this episode, we investigate whether this is true or not. In this video, we will talk about both US and Australian housing prices. The Australian component will have a timestamp here. In terms of both, however, what you have is a common refrain from Gen Z and millennials that boomers have stolen their housing dream. The dream that they can afford to buy a house themselves. They claim that it's the boomers' fault that they are now priced out of the market. And the common refrain, both in America and in Australia, relates to multipliers of the median or average wage compared with how many years you would have to pay a house off. In this episode, we will analyze this, but what you get in the media typically is comments like this.
According to Consumer Affairs, Gen Z's purchasing power is now 86% lower than baby boomers at the same age, forcing them to spend twice as much on housing.
And this.
When I landed my first job fresh out of college, I was thrilled to finally start building my own life. Yet, despite working full-time and juggling multiple side gigs, saving enough for a down payment on a modest apartment seemed impossible.
And this.
Baby boomers are just ruining the housing market for younger generations. People over 55 own over half the homes in the United States, which is a lot, but it's kind of fine because older people tend to be wealthier and own their homes. The problem is the types of homes that they own and the fact that they're never going to downsize.
Okay, so as we've seen, millennials and Gen Z have big complaints about the American dream, and in the Australian context, the Australian dream, and how boomers have ruined it for them, and that housing now and getting access to that dream is no longer accessible. So let's test this for reality. What I'll do is I'll compare 1980 figures inflated to 2025. In other words, the numbers that you see will be as if it's occurring today rather than in 1980. So, in terms of annual earnings, in 1980, in today's money, the median American would have earned $46,138, whereas today they earn about $62,000. So what was the inflation-adjusted median house price? In 1980, $220,000. Today, $416,000. So, okay, significantly more expensive today, almost twice as much. Indeed, in terms of multipliers, the median American would have needed 4.77 years in 1980 to pay off the house using their full wage, whereas now it's 6.71 years. So, okay, seems like the millennials and Gen Z have got it right. But look at the mortgage interest rate. It was 13.7% back in 1980, now 6.8%. Now, if we borrow 80% of the house price in terms of mortgage, in other words, we have a 20% down payment. For the 1980 house, we'd borrow $176,000. We'd borrow $335,000 in 2025. So monthly repayments on a 30-year term, $2,049 in 1980, $2,175 now. So a little bit more now than it was back then. Now let's take that median take-home pay and take tax out of it and see how much money you have left after you've paid income tax. In 1980, $3,194, now $4,453. Now, let's take out the mortgage as well. So, in other words, how much have you got left in your pocket after you've paid tax and the mortgage? In 1980, you would have had $1,145 left. Now you've got $2,279. So, as you can see clearly, Gen Z and the millennials don't have it right. The media is pushing a scare story here where they're talking about look at how much house prices have increased and look at how many years you'd have to pay off the average house. They're not taking into account increased earnings and indeed reduced interest rates on loans. Now let's have a look at the Australian context. Just like in the US, you have video articles and discussion about housing prices like this.
Baby boomers and empty nesters are staying put in their big family home.
And this.
Australia's housing crisis is the result of decades of failure by the nation's political classes. After rising at about double the rate of incomes for 25 years, houses have become unaffordable for nearly all but the well-off.
And this.
In the 60s, a typical house was one with room.
We've got a 30-year mortgage that doesn't strain the weekly pay packet.
But it's a dream that's shrinking. A block out in the suburbs replaced by smaller spaces.
Okay. In 1980, the median Australian wage was 56,673 Australian dollars. It's now $89,024. So what's the inflation adjusted house price? In 1980, it was $201,000. It's now $805,000. Wow, 4 times as much. Indeed. In 1980, you only paid 3.54 years of a median wage to pay for your house. Now it's 9 years. So millennials and Gen Z have got it right. Those terrible boomers have really stolen their dream. Now let's have a look at mortgage interest rates. It's less than half now what it was back in 1980. It was 12.5% then, it's 5.6% now. Okay, how much do you need to borrow on that median house if you've put down 20%? 1980, $161,000, now $644,000. Okay, clearly a lot more. What are the monthly repayments on a 30-year loan? $1,720 in 1980, $3,638 now. Okay, so clearly it's about double now in terms of your mortgage repayments compared with 1980. So do Gen Z and millennials have it right? Okay, let's have a look. How much do you have after you have paid tax per month? 1980, it was $3,794. Now it's $5,960. So after paying off your mortgage and your tax, how much do you have left in your pocket per month? 1980, $2,074, now $2,322. So even in the Australian context, where house prices are 4 times what they were back in 1980, you still have more money left over after you've paid tax and your mortgage now compared with then. So, as you can see, the millennials and Gen Z don't have it right. The boomers actually had it tougher when it came to repaying paying off a median house on a median wage. As can be seen in both the US and Australia, housing, or in particularly paying off a mortgage, is more affordable now than it was 45 years ago or 40 years ago. So it's certainly not worse than when the boomers were getting housing. What is inarguable is the fact that deposits these days, a 20% deposit, is more difficult to save. However, there are options. For instance, in Australia, you can get a mortgage with 5% down payment, albeit you have to take out mortgage lenders' insurance. But what I have not encountered before is the level of visceral hatred towards boomers by younger generations. I certainly don't recall when I was young anyone in my age cohort crying the generations that preceded us and the fact that they had housing we didn't and they were wealthier than we were. The problem is these days millennials and Gen Z seem to think that boomers have always been relatively wealthy. They don't realize that when we were young, we were also finding it incredibly tough. But building wealth takes time. And what the boomers have had is time to build that wealth. This is something that the younger generations need to realize. The other thing that has to be stated is that when we were young, we were not going on overseas holidays and eating out all the time. I know that the younger generations will complain, oh, typical boomer statement, but it's a statement of fact. And the data, as far as housing affordability, speaks for itself. Thank you very much for watching. Please let me know what your thoughts are in the comments below.